Peppa and Pedro were standing by the shelves with children's books. Peppa noticed an old fairy tale book. Its cover shimmered with uneven light. The surface was cold and sticky. The book opened itself. The pages stuck together and became damp. Black letters slid off the pages in a viscous mass. The mass formed insects with thin, shiny legs. The insects crawled onto Peppa's hands. Peppa screamed. She threw the book to the floor. Nearby books began to open one after another. Swarms of black creatures flew out of the books. Pedro was standing by a small bookhouse watching an open book. Letters from its pages detached and crawled onto his hands. A black mass enveloped Pedro's face. He froze in place. A sharp squeal tore through the air, sounding like tearing parchment. The librarian stood at the end of the aisle, her eyes shining unnaturally. Peppa burst into an empty hall. She dove under the nearest table. The librarian's white shoes stopped nearby. Her socks looked directly at her. Peppa froze. The shoes turned away and moved back. Peppa crawled out from under the table. The librarian was standing by a window. Peppa started crawling toward the archive door. She turned around. The librarian turned her head. Her eyes became spinning reels. Distorted letters flickered on film strips within them. Her mouth stretched into a silent scream. Peppa was pulled into the darkness of the storage room. Shelves rose up to the ceiling, towering over her. The air was thick with dust. She pressed against the door, her heart pounding fiercely. At the end of the aisle stood a figure, motionless. Peppa approached. Pedro was facing a shelf, his face covered with black mass that pulsed slowly. Books on the shelves trembled. Pages fluttered wildly. A mask on Pedro's face turned around. Empty eye sockets stared at Peppa directly. She ran toward the exit. The daylight beckoned at the end. She hurried around a corner. Peppa froze. Standing in front of it was the librarian, blocking her way. Her figure was motionless. Her reel-like eyes spun slowly, flickering Peppa's name on film. Her mouth stretched into that same voiceless grimace. Black shadows oozed from beneath her skirt, flowing onto the floor like ink. Peppa turned back. Behind her, shadows caught up, wrapping around her legs as cold, sticky mass rose upward. The light from behind the door faded the motionless figure of the librarian, and advancing darkness obscured it completely. Peppa and George were building a castle in the sandbox. The sand beneath their feet trembled. Suddenly, holes appeared in the ground. Dark, sticky pits. A black tentacle grabbed George's dinosaur. The holes vanished instantly. The sand felt cold, heavy. Round mounds started to rise all around. One of them opened, revealing a black, sandy mouth full of teeth. Peppa grabbed George and they ran toward the house. The mouth growled behind them. Waves of sand rippled under their feet. Evening. The backyard. Shadows were growing longer. From a new hole, George's dinosaur crawled out, covered in shiny black sand, its red eyes glowing. The toy turned its head and looked at Peppa. The dinosaur's teeth had turned black. All the sandy patches in the yard began to stir. Tentacles of black sand stretched out toward the children. The entire yard became a sea of moving black sand. A giant faceless figure emerged. In its mouth, absolute darkness. Peppa and George ran into the house. On the walls, a flickering reflection appeared. Behind Peppa stood 1,000 barely visible sandy hands. Peppa slammed the door shut. George was crying. Black sand tapped against the glass and crept up the walls of the house. Soon it began slipping under the door. Grains of sand fell from the ceiling onto Peppa's shoulder. She ran to the kitchen. The hourglass on the table flipped over, and the sand inside turned black. In the window's reflection, Peppa saw her own face, but her eyes were filled with black sand. The walls began to form a shifting message, written in sand. "You will not leave." Peppa returned to the hallway. A shadow flickered. George was standing there, but without a face and with eyes made of black grains. In the corner of the room, the sand gathered into a tall arch, through which distant laughter could be heard, though no one was laughing. In Peppa's house, the paintings on the walls began to disappear. Instead of bright images, there were empty frames emanating sinister, dark energy. A cold, ominous aura filled the air. Peppa saw inside one of the frames a dark abyss that was swallowing everything around it. Suddenly, a sinister voice emerged from the abyss. "You won't be able to save them. All worlds will vanish forever. The paintings are portals to other worlds. A dark creature has stolen them to trap these worlds in eternal darkness. The glowing orbs are the spirits of the paintings, trying to resist, but without help, their fate is sealed. To restore the paintings, she needs to find an ancient magical crystal hidden in the abandoned library of the house. She heard a quiet whisper behind her back. It was her mother. Her eyes turned bright red. Suddenly, a sinister mist began to emanate from her body. She spoke in a foreign voice. "You came too late. Now I will remain this monster forever." The monster grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into the darkness. The glowing orb tried to help her, but it was already too late. The monster turned her into a victim of eternal darkness. Now he roams through the house, hunting for new victims. His hideous face has become a symbol of evil's ultimate victory over good. The entire house is shrouded in darkness. The paintings have disappeared forever. The glowing orbs have finally gone out, and the monster wanders through the house or hides in dark corners, waiting for new victims. Peppa put on an old record. The cheerful melody suddenly crackled and slowed down. Old songs remember more than words. Shadows stretched toward Peppa. On the TV, the silhouette of Mr. Melodious. A whisper from the speaker.
Peppa, George, onto the stage.
Black tar flows from the speaker. A thud from above. Child's room. The squeak of toys. A tentacle of tar burst out of the speaker. Peppa jumped back. The shadow of the turntable grew up to the ceiling in the shape of Melodious. The conductor calls the orchestra. Peppa ran upstairs. Tar was chasing her. The stairs rippled like water. Shadows of the railing. Tentacles. On the landing, Peppa looked back. Below stood Melodious. A flick of his spike. Drops of tar dripped from above. On the steps, distorted notes. Peppa burst into the nursery, slammed the door shut. Suddenly, a knock sounded. A refuge or a stage. George froze. Boys jerked in sync. Wallpaper, pulsating notes. The ceiling, hanging tentacles. George turned around. Black eyes. A mechanical smile. From his mouth, a distorted hum. Boys marched toward Peppa. The teddy bear clicked its jaws. Everyone in formation. The door opened. A ghostly mom. Her face blurred. Her mouth a howling melody. The conductor is pleased with new voices. Peppa rushed toward the door. Mom grabbed her with tentacle-like hands. George stood up and pulled Peppa inside as toys surrounded them. Tar sealed the window, the staircase, nursery walls, sheet music stands. The ceiling presses down. The conductor found his soloists. Tar bound Peppa tight. Melodious bowed deeply. Hollow eye sockets, crimson light. Melodious waved his spine. Mom and George opened their mouths, and a deafening howl erupted. Peppa twitched in rhythm. Tar covered her eyes. An endless game began.